No doubt the most confused man in Canada this morning was British Columbia Premier David Eby, who had gotten very used to knowing that he wasn't even going to have to campaign for re-election in this next provincial election in British Columbia. He got used to 21, 18, 28% leads over his opponents in the province. But this morning, a new Mainstreet Research poll dropped showing that now the BC NDP are only leading the BC Conservatives by 6 points. You can even see in the last Angus Reid poll, they were up 21, in Research Co. 21, and in Poilievre, they were up all the way in front by 28 points. That is an incredible lead, and now this is an incredibly fast shrink to their lead. What's really going on here, and this is the poll more in detail, is that the BC Conservatives and the BC United have finally figured out who should be the main opposition party in British Columbia. You see, if you don't know this, especially if you don't live in the province of British Columbia, for the longest time, British Columbia was the province of social credit, just the way Alberta had been the province of social credit. And because the Social Credit Party was a big tent party that you really couldn't peg on a political spectrum, when it finally collapsed in the early 90s, basically nobody knew really where to go on the right. And so what we had was all the people on the conservative right just joining the BC Liberal Party, and the BC Liberal Party became a little bit more of a big tent party than the federal Liberals are. There's a room for effectively red Tories and moderate Conservatives within the BC Liberals. But since the BC Liberals and Christy Clark got thrown out of the provincial government and John Horgan took over, and now David Eby replacing John Horgan, the BC Liberals brand is complete mud. And that's not just their own fault, it's also the fault of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau making the BC Liberals brand association look awful. So that has led the BC Liberal Party to rebrand themselves now as the BC United, which is a horrible name. Like BC United immediately just feels limp. Like nobody cares. Like we aren't even trying anymore. We are BC United. We are the BC Apathy Party. And now because everyone kind of knows they're just another lefty party and there's no room left for conservatives in that party, the BC Conservative Party, which had been on life support since back when the Social Credit Party was around, finally had a massive resurgence when John Rousted crossed the floor and joined it and actually became its leader, who actually has a seat in the provincial legislature. And since then, that happened a little bit more like than a year and a half ago or so. Since then, there's been kind of a jockeying for position between the BC Cons and BC United. Although the United has a lot more seats than the Cons, who only have 2 seats due to floor crossings, right now, the BC United is utterly collapsing because, well, if you're a lefty voter, you might as well go vote for the NDP, and if you're on the right, you should go vote for the BC Conservatives. And so they're looking a lot like the PC party under Kim Campbell federally in 1993. It's the kind of the party for nobody. And now David Eby is actually going to have a real challenger. And the bad thing for David Eby is that David Eby is completely unused to actually having a legitimate opponent. He actually hasn't had to compete really against anybody. And so he has passed just pants on head crazy laws over the past 2 years. He has been pushing for more drug decriminalization, more safe supply, all of this crazy nonsense, and defending his provincial carbon tax to the death. Most provinces in Canada have the federal carbon tax because they refused as provinces to pass their own, and so Justin Trudeau forced a carbon tax on them. And now BC Premier David Eby is now getting into fights with Conservative federal leader Pierre Poilievre, because Poilievre obviously wants to get rid of the federal carbon tax and is putting pressure on David Eby, because it's just a smart political move, demanding that he remove the provincial carbon tax when the time comes. David Eby thinks he can score points against Poilievre, and so he's been defending what is really an actual boat anchor on David Eby's popularity, his own carbon tax, because he thinks that it will somehow help him to fight with Poilievre. Again, David Eby was never that popular. Yes, you'll find BC, like the premier popularity polls showing he's one of the most popular in the country, but again, that's because he had no opposition. Now that John Rousted and the BC Conservatives are becoming a real opposition, now David Eby's in trouble because he's been embracing absolutely stupid policies. He's been tying himself to a burning log and thinking that it didn't matter what he did, the BC Conservatives and United were going to fight each other and that it was just going to be a fight for second place. Now it's a fight for first place, and David Eby's having to own sky-high crime, sky-high drug death rates, and crazy high taxes. Now, if he backs off, he's just going to give credence to the fact that the BC Conservatives would be even better. So now all he has left is doubling down and hoping that by just simply ignoring the problems, he can convince people that it's actually much better in British Columbia than it really is. British Columbia is a basket case when it comes to housing prices. It's the worst in the country. It's the worst in the country when it comes to drug addiction. It is the worst in the country in a lot of ways when it comes to crime. Look at Vancouver's East Side. All the BC Conservatives have to do, and I encourage anyone watching this who's in British Columbia, vote for the BC Conservatives. I don't care if, well, the United right now has a better chance in my area. By election day, they will not. Just back the Conservatives, donate to them, support them, volunteer for them. The BC Conservatives should make their entire platform cutting drug use, cutting crime, and cutting taxes. It should, well, you could even simplify it, just cut crime, cut taxes. That is it. I don't like when conservatives try and, tinker too much with their platform. And the BC Conservatives haven't. They've actually been quite focused. I don't like when you see conservative campaigns, especially municipally, say, well, we're going to give you a little bit of a tax credit here, and we'll do a sort of reinvestment effort over here, and we'll have some sort of subsidies for this industry, but we'll act more fiscally conservative over here. No. Cut taxes, cut crime, and end gender theory in the classroom. Those are the three things. I just had that third one. I just remembered it. Those are the three things. If you are running a party in British Columbia or even federally in Canada, if you run on those three things in the current climate in Canada, you will win. Do not overcomplicate it. Keep it simple, sweetheart. Just do that. So I am happy to see David Eby is actually at risk of losing this next election. And if you're in British Columbia, vote for the Conservatives and make sure you keep everyone focused on the issue of crime, taxes, and gender theory. David Eby will not have an easy time getting reelected if these three things become the referendum of the election, the referendum issues. Anyways, that should be it for me today. Shameless plug. I do not live in British Columbia, but I do live in Calgary, and I, Wyatt Claypool, I'm running for the Calgary Signal Hill Federal Conservative Party nomination. So if you live on the west side of Calgary, buy a Federal Conservative Party membership and check out my website, wyattclaypool.com. If you're on the west side of Calgary, first make sure you actually live in the boundaries. These are what the new boundaries of the riding will look like. And also you can donate to the legal fund for the National Telegraph. And myself, we're being sued by a ridiculous billionaire developer from China for defamation. Defamation he cannot prove, and his deposition went horrible because he actually couldn't even prove that he threatened to sue the people that we primarily referenced for every source that we had, for all of the things that we'd said about him. We barely said anything about him. We just hyperlinked to a Globe and Mail article, and I guess that means we defamed him because we referenced a 1.5-year old Globe and Mail article that he apparently never was bothered enough by to even send in a libel notice. Or at least he hasn't proven to us yet that he sent in a libel notice, and he was supposed to prove that since back in September. Anyway, sorry, short little legal update for you guys if you watch the channel and you want to know what's going on. I've sent in my undertaking, so they know all the additional information they want from me, and that is pretty much it. Have a good one, everyone.